We got DJ Reed from the New York Jets, I think, highlighting this group here. And then we got a handful of other interesting players: Rasul Douglas, Carlton Davis, Charvarius Ward, Asante Samuel Jr., Byron Murphy Jr. We got Mike Hilton, Kendall Fuller, Paulson Adebo. These are the guys that we have listed as sort of those top targets there. Who do you want to call out from this cornerback group?
I think you have a lot of solid veteran players here, especially a lot of guys who can play well in zone coverage and fit in several different systems. I think about, San Francisco. I think about the Rams. There's a lot of different team fits here. But I look at Byron Murphy from the Vikings, and still a relatively young player. Had the best season of his career this past year under Brian Flores. 72.8 overall, 72.6 coverage grade, 6 interceptions, all of those career highs. So I'm curious if he's a player that Minnesota is really trying hard to retain, or how expensive that is going to be, because you can never have enough cornerbacks, right? And I think he's one, if you're feeling comfortable about signing to a 3-4 year deal, I think him and DJ Reed might be the two guys that you think about. Okay, we're going to get him for multiple years. He's going to be productive, pretty scheme versatile, right? I think we've seen multiple solid seasons out of him, and Murphy coming off of his best one really intrigues me to see how his market's going to look.
I'm very interested in Charvarius Ward, who I think in a vacuum, the Commanders, I was about to say there's a landing spot for him. Whoops, spoiled it. In a vacuum, I think Ward would stay with the San Francisco 49ers, but been through a lot on the personal side. Him and his family have been through a lot during their time when they've been in San Francisco, and he's kind of talked about like, hey, I kind of just want to change the scenery, and you understand and respect that. But I think he's a good football player. I really do. So I look at teams that are going to run a little bit more cover 3 on the outside, and I think Charvarius Ward would be good. I look at the Buffalo Bills. I know they don't have a lot of money to spend, but again, like that contender, somebody's got that experience that Ward has over the last couple of years with those playoff runs that San Francisco has been a part of. Did they go after a guy like Ward if they can get him a little bit cheaper to say, hey, now we don't think we have to take a cornerback at the back end of the first round. We could really focus on defensive line, something like that. Commanders are another spot with them losing a couple of cornerbacks from their room last year. Do they get him to play on the outside of one of those cornerback positions so they can move Mike Sanders still a little bit more into the slot? New England Patriots, right? Do they set themselves up to say like, hey, let's go get another corner opposite Christian Gonzalez, and we can sort of play it like that, and again, have more flexibility to play the draft however we want. But Ward is the one who I'm really looking at, and I think that he could be a big-time sort of like over-the-top difference maker as a guy who probably shouldn't be leaving the 49ers if we're talking about just talent alone, but you can understand just the situation of him wanting to sort of have a fresh start somewhere else. So what about DJ Reed? Obviously, like over the last couple of years, last 2 years, he was part of the best cornerback duo in the league with Sauce Gardner. It wasn't a great year this past year for the Jets defense overall, but he feels like if you're going to make the biggest splash at corner, he's kind of the guy to do it. Is there a specific team that you really think for DJ Reed?
No, I think there's going to be at least a half dozen in on him, right? I think about the Raiders, who had the lowest coverage grade in the league last year, and they need multiple pieces in their secondary. I think about the Arizona Cardinals, who could definitely use an outside cornerback or two. They're really good in the slot. They're really good at safety, but they need some outside help. I think the Rams, they need some outside cornerback help. I think there's a ton of teams with a good amount of cap space that could use a player like DJ Reed. And even, look, there's some good veteran options too. You mentioned Ward, Byron Murphy. I think Kendall Fuller's an underrated option. Had a down year in Miami, but in a similar light, in a defense like that, I think Kendall Fuller could be a really good fit in a lot of spots. But I think you mentioned it. Reed's the top guy. He's going to have the most robust market. And I think there's going to be a lot of teams, at least a half dozen, I think, in on the bidding for him as, if not a number one corner, a guy who can make your secondary a lot better. Let's even take the Raiders, right? You take DJ Reed on one side, and if they decide at 6 overall, take a guy like Will Johnson, well, now you've just gotten 2 starting cornerbacks in one offseason. So I think Reed, as a very solid high-end CB2 at the least, is going to get a lot of money this offseason.